I'm Catherine Lucero, the Director of the Office of Youth and Community Restoration, OICR. I'm pleased to welcome you to the second webinar in this special series. This series focuses on healing and trauma-informed design strategies that promote rehabilitation and well-being for youth in secure settings. The promise of SB 823 envisions youth living close to home in smaller group settings that are as normalized as possible to support their adolescent development. While achieving a home-like setting may not be always possible, there are many ways to achieve the aspiration of safe, healing, and supportive spaces. In our first webinar, we explored how trauma-informed design can impact youth rehabilitation. We discussed approaches to centering youth voices in the design process and strategies for creating spaces that foster healing, growth, and well-being. If you missed it, a recording is available on the resources section of our website. Today, in the second part of this series, we will focus on a specific design elements and transformative ideas for secure settings. Together, we'll learn about actionable strategies that can reimagine these environments for the benefit of youth and staff alike. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our presenters from Mass Design. Mass Design Group is a nonprofit architectural firm collaborating with OICR to address immediate physical space needs for youth in the secure youth treatment facilities. They are also supporting counties and leveraging funding for non-secure facilities to focus on decarceration and helping youth transition back into their communities. Today, the Mass Design team will share trauma-informed design recommendations based on research, best practices, and site visits. They will also provide insights into tailored designs, training, and technical assistance starting in 2025, as well as a research report expected by mid-2025. With that, I am pleased to welcome one of our presenters from Mass Design, Nathaniel Coram.
Hey, thank you, Catherine. Thanks so much. Hello, everybody. Hope it's going well by you today. My name is Nathaniel Coram. I'm a design director at Mass and architecture and design lead in community-based alternatives for our work with OICR. I'd like to introduce our other colleagues here. Would you all chime in? Regina, Alejandra, Violeta?
Yeah, I can hop in. I'm Regina Chen. I'm a senior principal and managing director at Mass Design Group, and I've been helping to guide our design engagement and restorative justice work for the last 10 years here. Alejandra, do you want to go?
Yes, hi everyone. Good to see y'all again. I'm Alejandra Cervantes Enriquez. I'm the project manager for our work with OICR, and at Mass, I help lead our accompaniment and impact work in areas of research, community engagement, and our strategic work as well. Violeta, I'll pass it to you.
Hi all, I'm Violeta Smart. I'm a design researcher at Mass and I have a background in architecture and have been supporting this work as a researcher doing our data analysis and visualization. It's great to see you all.
And we also wanted to give a shout out to our colleague, Selena Brownotter, who's joining us on this call and has been instrumental in pulling in research. So what do the next 2 hours look like? We'll start with a brief overview of our goals today. And even though I know everyone has memorized and rewatched our last webinar, we'll give a short recap of our first webinar from 3 weeks ago to highlight key takeaways and how to implement a trauma-informed design process. And then we'll get to what we've all been waiting for, design recommendations. We'll be sharing inspiring and realistic design ideas, case studies, and also we'll get to hear from a few folks about their experience creating new spaces. We're hoping to keep a good amount of time for us all to hear from one another in breakout groups, share what's on our minds and what you've all been thinking about, and to leave enough time at the end to share back collective key takeaways and any questions that are coming up for folks. So here's your warning to get ready to turn on your cameras if you can and come off mute to share some ideas, concerns, comments, questions, and compliments if you've got them. We're always accepting compliments. If you weren't able to join us or just really like listening to our voices, we'll share the link to the video recording of our first webinar and can also share those slides if you would like. There are these two webinars, of course, are just part of the variety of resources available to you as you think about your facilities and operations. In addition to these webinars, we're creating a report to synthesize the recommendations and case studies, and you'll also find other webinars and publications that can help you as you seek to continually improve upon your ability to provide trauma-informed care for your youth and your teams. So what are our goals for today? We want to start by getting us all on the same page about the different elements of design that can be used to advance the principles of trauma-informed design. Kind of an architecture 101 class, if you will. We also want everyone to feel inspired by design ideas that can transform youth, staff, and family experience in secure settings. And importantly, we want everyone to remember that you are not alone. We're hoping to make this space one where we can all learn from each other's experiences, and that we, the MASS team, we're here to represent the opportunities and lessons from the other facilities we visited as well. And we've got your back. So for starters, we shared this last time, but wanted to reiterate that we're on the same page about what this is and what this is not. We'll start with the knowns. We believe we know that there is not a lot of funding available to make capital investments in facilities. So the webinars will show low-hanging fruit that doesn't require significant investments. Two, we know that facilities were not designed to adequately support youth and staff. We know that many of your spaces are often working against you and your team. So the webinars will show best practices that can help bring your physical spaces alongside to support you and your work better. And third, we know that physical space challenges alone are not enough. Neither can cultural or programmatic changes alone meet all the needs of youth and staff. So the webinars will show examples of spatial changes paired with cultural changes, and explain how the process itself can center the lived experience of system-impacted youth and staff. Webinar 1 focused on how to center the lived experience of system-impacted youth and staff, and today we will focus on sharing the low-hanging fruit, a range of interventions, examples of spatial and cultural changes that can help transform the experience of living and working in your facilities, even if you don't have a lot of capital to help. I'd like to pass to my colleague, Regina.
Great. Thanks, Nathaniel. So I'm going to give a quick recap of webinar 1. In the first webinar 3 weeks ago, we talked about how the design process is not just 2 phases, design and construction, even though many people think it is. There's actually very important phases of planning and evaluation that occur both before and after those 2 phases of design and construction. In the last webinar, we also talked about how you can use your early planning stages to engage all of your stakeholders, especially those who are most impacted by any design change or your physical facility. And today we're going to be focusing on the design step in the process. I do want to flag, don't let today's conversation fool you into forgetting to engage your staff and residents as much as you're able to throughout the whole process. Your process, your trauma-informed design process doesn't even stop after you've implemented your changes. You are going to be getting inputs and feedback well after you implement any changes, and you'll likely need to make some adaptations and iterations as you continue settling into operating your new space. In our last webinar, we also talked about how physical changes aren't enough and how cultural shifts and physical changes really need to go hand in hand to truly serve your youth and staff in a trauma-informed way. And we reflected on some of the outcomes of our engagement so far with youth and staff in different facilities, and understanding how we can shape our recommendations around their and all of your needs. So we organized what we heard into 5 key themes of needs to understand how physical and cultural changes could support youth and staff. The first need is around the idea of dignity. A lot of what we heard in engaging youth, staff, and families align with the aforementioned Youth Dignity Guide initiative and efforts in understanding how the built environment can support self-worth and pride. One member of the Youth Advisory Board said to us, and I quote, "The idea that we don't deserve it gets handed down throughout the system." So we know the culture and space of secure facilities often reinforces the idea that the youth and also your staff don't deserve high quality spaces. So the opportunities for dignity have emerged as a real clear need as we think about our physical environment. Closely tied to the idea of dignity is that of agency, and the ability for youth and staff to be able to control elements of their lives around them. In one of our engagements, a youth advisory board member commented, and again, I'm quoting, being able to change the temperature of the water may not seem like a big thing, but it really goes a long way. So while our design ideas later on will primarily focus on what the space looks and feels like, we encourage you to look for opportunities to share the power of decision making, whether it's about the space or how youth are spending their time with the people who will be most affected by any decision. From the youth, we also heard a lot about the importance of supportive networks, which I think hopefully we all know the significance of. So there are a lot of opportunities for your spaces to support ideas shared in the Youth Dignity Guide around expanded visitation experiences, how youth make and build relationships with each other and with staff, how they're able to communicate with their loved ones, and other necessary connections that can support youth during their time in secure facilities. These supportive networks, as we all know, are even more important as youth prepare to transition home, and hopefully will be the networks that they continue to lean on in their home communities. Many youth also highlighted the importance of having access to resources like training and job opportunities that can contribute to their ability to develop employable skills. So, in addition to these capacity building opportunities, we've also heard about the importance of acknowledging their learning by awarding things like certification or other recognitions which can support employability on the outside. They also share that they want access to diverse and engaging education, and they want the opportunity to choose paths that align with their own goals and interests. And finally, youth also brought up the importance of health and wellness. They talked about their desire for diverse opportunities for physical activity, and they also acknowledged a desire to have opportunities for creative expression. One of the mentors that we talked to said youth might not be able to express how they're feeling with words, but maybe they could do it with music or art. So, how are we giving youth opportunity to grow in their ability to express themselves within our physical environment? As we mentioned last time, we are working on a toolkit that you can use to help engage your staff, youth, families, and community based organizational partners, and having these conversations about your space and setting priorities that are responsive to the identified needs in your community. So if you are interested in receiving a copy, of the toolkit, whether a digital or a physical copy, Violetta is going to drop a form for you to fill out. Thank you, Violetta, and we can send more information about that as necessary. So I'll pass the mic to Alejandra, who's going to lead us through a little warm-up exercise to really stretch and get our design muscles activated.
Great, thanks, Regina. So in the next series of slides, I'm going to share two pairs of images, and I want y'all to consider how the design elements in these images play a role in shaping the experience you have as you look at them. And we hope this exercise is a way to set the stage today to help us consider how even the smallest of design decisions can have a profound impact on the people that might be using the spaces. So let's get started. This is our first pair that shows an example of a community room. So let's take a little bit of time, and I'm going to ask folks to consider the next questions. How are the spaces making you feel as you look at them? What is it about these rooms that's making you feel that way? And as you consider this, I'm going to invite a couple of people to just share and come off mute what comes to mind as you look at these images.
Bright and airy.
Bright and airy. Anybody else want to come up here and share? What about, I'm assuming that was the right image, but what about the left image?
Yeah, the left one is very kind of drab and not very inviting. There's nothing in there.
Drab, not very inviting, not a lot in there. Mm-hmm.
Closed in. on the left, very claustrophobic for me, actually.
I think the one on the left looks relatively sterile. Reminds me of like a hospital room, and the one on the right looks more lived in, like a house.
Mm.
One on the right's got more variation in colors and shapes and just overall variation throughout the room. The one on the left's very, you know, not only monochromatic with color, but just all the shapes. Everything is just kind of rectangular, so not any variation and stuff in that one.
That's great. Thanks y'all for jumping in. I want to echo what everybody shared, as a big takeaway, because the first image, the one on the left, for sure reflects a lot of these pitfalls that y'all are describing, right? There's harsh singular lighting, there's dark contrast, there's nothing in there, somebody said, right? So the use of generic decor and dark monotones, it's very impersonal and very uninspiring. There's also limited visibility and access points, which can isolate people who are in the room or make them feel separate from everybody else. And also the choice and placement of the furniture can discourage interaction. It doesn't really tell a story of what's supposed to happen in that space, right? So spaces like this miss the opportunity for inclusivity, connection, and even no natural light. And the second image, the one on the right, it just feels like a breath of fresh air, right? It's bright, it's airy, that's what we heard. It's filled with light. There's big windows. It can let sunlight pour into the space. There's also this double volume space. It does feel like a home. And you have room to stretch and don't feel claustrophobic within. And I want to highlight that having access to different circulation or pathways to move throughout the space is really important for choice when we think about trauma-informed design. And the type of furniture that we see in here can support different types of activities and gatherings. And the small details on the walls and even the indoor plants can help bring some calm to the space. So thinking about how this space plays a role in creating connection and a sense of feeling vibrant and a welcoming environment is something to highlight. And for our next pair, we're looking at a staff break room in this case. So as you look at these images, similar exercise, what words come to mind? What feelings or sensations are some of the first ones that come to your brain? And I love the participation in the next one. Let's keep it going. But I want to invite y'all to also say your name, maybe before you share what comes to mind.
Yeah, this is James Morales. With very similar to the first examples. The one on the left is kind of just feels like it's a converted space or very closed off. With the one on the right, you have natural light coming in. It feels very home-like with the looks like maybe a full-size refrigerator and seating for multiple options for seating.
This is Beverly Brooke. It's interesting. The one on the left has a clock and the one on the right doesn't. So it reminded me more of a therapist room, like where the two chairs are and then the clock. So the other one seems more open and like a place to sit down and eat something, but also just relax.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Beverly. Anybody else? Last few things to get in before we continue. I mean, I think what was shared is spot on, right? I think this idea of the details in the one in the left, there's kind of similar qualities from what we saw in the last pair, right? There's no natural light. It feels harsh. There's cold lighting. There's a clock that maybe makes you feel a certain way if this were your break room. There's also this furniture that's kind of laid out in a way that makes you feel kind of a sense of rigidity and oppression. And as we're talking about the furniture, if you look at how it's laid out, their backs are to the entrance, so that kind of limits your ability to have clear sight lines and can impact your sense of feeling unsafe or kind of lacking connection. And by contrast, on the second image, I think we're all generally in agreement that it feels very different. There's a sense of feeling supported and maybe just a sense of calm. There's different types of furniture all around that invite relaxation or adaptability or higher levels of activity. So this promotes like a positive, inclusive atmosphere, and the details such as natural light and the greenery and natural materials also encourage a sense of like calm and introspection. So the layout of this space also contributes to having those clear sight lines, which are very important to create a sense of safety. And that was it. That was our warm-up exercise. I just want to shout out y'all that participated and those at the chat. I know things are coming up there. Congrats everyone on the activity. So where did we start here? I think we wanted to start by acknowledging that there are a lot of design elements that contribute to a trauma-informed or a trauma-inducing space. And we just wanted to kind of offer here, there are a lot of design tools that can be used to shape space. For instance, the act of design can encompass deciding how buildings sit and are oriented on a site, what the building's shape and form will be, and how even spaces connect to one another to support some kind of purpose. It's also about creating different pathways and making sure that people feel they can move comfortably throughout the spaces, and also considering the details that make space feel personal and usable. Design is also about crafting an environment that feels right through the materials, the furnishings, and even the way light moves through the space. And at the same time, design considers the bigger picture, how the building responds to its surroundings. It's how it supports health and comfort, and also how it stands resilient against environmental challenges. So all of these decisions can be very big or very small, and they all need to work together to create spaces that meet the practical needs and the emotional experiences. So that's why when we talk about design, it's not just about aesthetics, it's about how people live, move, and feel in a space, and how space supports their everyday lives. And today we're not going to try to talk about all of them. We're only going to talk about a handful of these decisions because we know many of them were made a long time ago when we think about your facilities, right? And a lot of them are out of your control. But we wanted to start here to help open everybody's eyes to the built world around you and how it could be affecting you. So I'm going to stop talking for a little bit. I want to hear from everybody. So we sent this at the end of our last webinar, and we posed this as homework. And we wanted to invite you to think about a space in your facility that was in need of change. And we wanted to ask, what is this space? Why isn't it meeting your needs? And if you didn't attend webinar 1, that's fine. Just take a moment to think about this question. And as you do, I want to invite people to share your response in the chat. What is this space, and why is it falling short of meeting your needs? We won't stop too much here. I just want to invite maybe a couple of people to come off mute and share with us what comes to mind.
This is James Morales again. So we have a dormitory setting for our camp program, and it's just a 25-year-old space, and it was new, 25 years ago, but it, just with the amount of use that has gone through, it's just been really in disrepair, and so it's just kind of drab, and so we're trying to make it more home-like, soften up some of the concrete, and refurbish the restrooms, things like that, just to make it, the kids realize that they are valued and they're just not being housed, that it's going to be, a good transition from custodial setting to home.
Thanks for sharing, James. And James, you're calling in from Yuba, correct? Is this a SYTF setting, or sorry if I missed the dormitory setting where it is?
This is a possible step down for some youth,
okay,
depending on their criteria. Yeah.
I mean, Emil Fisher, Indio Juvenile Hall. We have both detention and SYTF. We had an area, it's our kind of an activity area, and we've switched from detention to the secure track. And so we replaced like our steel benches. We had, just prefab metal benches all the way around the rims to that rubberized furniture that kids can move around. So we have now clusters of 4 or stadium seating for movies, or they can break into different groups. Just having the flexibility of the furniture. We can't do much about the space because it's 40 years old, but we were able to make things movable, portable, which now allows the flexibility depending on the scenario with the kids. So that was a big help for us.
Thanks, Emil. I'm hoping from both of these examples that we can touch on in our design recommendations in a few minutes, just in a few of these kind of low touch, low hanging renovations or adaptations that can be made with furniture that could help support or could help think about how to creatively think about these spaces that might not have a lot of room or a lot of adaptability in their way that they're set up, because as you're mentioning, they're pretty old, or they're kind of like it's costly to try to think about changing too radically. I'm also seeing some stuff in the chat. Thanks, Alma, for sharing.
Thanks, folks, for sharing those examples. Maybe we can keep moving on. And if you have any other examples that you thought about previously or that come to mind, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we'll have more time in breakout groups and at the end for us to come back and share a little bit more. So as Alejandra shared, there are a lot of tools in the designer's toolbox, but because of many of the constraints that we've talked about, that you are needing to make quick renovations often while working with tight budgets and limited timelines, this webinar is really going to focus on 3 elements that we consider to be low-hanging fruit. So first is spaces and activities, or what architects typically call the program of a space. So this is what's happening in a given room or an area. These design recommendations fall into a few key ways that you could use spaces. Second is look and feel, and this is what we're calling design decisions that you typically fix or adhere to your facility. So like light, paint, or acoustic treatments. And then third, we're going to be talking about furnishing and details. So these will be the things that are movable in a space, like your furniture, ideally your furniture, equipment, and personal belongings. So if you've undertaken a capital project before or a renovation, you'll often hear this last category referred to as FF&E, or furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So each of these recommendations will have a few subcategories that we'll go into further in each section. So I also wanted to give one last caveat before we hop into all of our design recommendations. First, we've reviewed all of our recommendations, everything that you're hearing today, and have been in conversations with BSCC, or the California Board of State and Community Corrections, to make sure that none of our recommendations are counter to the standards as they're captured in Title 24 or Title 15. That being said, there will be more policies and regulations that you will need to adhere to, notably from your local fire marshal or health inspector or other local building codes. And in addition, many changes really should be driven by your youth and staff, and ultimately are going to fall to the discretion of your team. So make sure you're including them through the process. That being said, this presentation today and our work really is going to err on the side of inspiration. We are really hoping to spur your imaginations about what is possible while still grounding all of our design recommendations in the reality of what's feasible. So with that, I'll pass it to Violetta to talk us through spaces and activities.
Thanks, Virginia. So over the past decade, many counties have seen a decrease in the amount of youth in detention, and this is in part thanks to the success of implementing diversion programs and community-based services. And as a result, many facilities are operating below the rated capacity, and this presents a huge opportunity for facilities to repurpose underutilized spaces to better serve the needs of both youth and also staff. So for example, there might be an empty room in your facility that with little design effort could be transformed. And even for those counties that have limited spaces and limited budgets, we know that we can find opportunities to make adaptations that can have a really high impact. So based on our research and our engagement with youth and staff and facility management, we have organized this opportunity for repurposing spaces or changing the way they're currently functioning around these 5 key categories that you're seeing on the screen. And these are creating spaces to support respite and self-care, facilitating access to the outdoors and nature, improving the visitation experience and encouraging connections to family and community, as well as supporting education and skills building, and also, as we're so often reminded, making spaces for play and artistic expression. And this is really about letting kids be kids. So in our toolkit, we have a set of exercises that are specifically designed to help facilitate conversations with your team and your youth to brainstorm and understand what uses and activities are a priority for your community. And these cards that you're seeing here on the screen show one of these tools, which is a set of cards with different spatial activities, like doing art in an art studio or using a kitchenette, or a space for doing yoga and meditation. And these cards include some really helpful information around how much space you'll typically need for these activities in terms of square footage, and also the equipment that might be necessary to facilitate them. So, as all of you know, most facilities were not designed to fully support the emotional and mental health needs of youth and staff. Most of them were built at a time where priorities were different, and research shows that living and working in detention facilities can exacerbate existing trauma and sometimes even also create new experiences of trauma. For example, many of the people that we talked to who spent time in detention or also who worked in detention facilities remember their experience through sensory memories that often involve loud noises like doors buzzing and doors slamming, and also sometimes even not being able to see green or touch grass or see the sky. So spaces play a major role in people's experience in detention facilities, whether they're working or they're living there. So the question is, how can a space support someone in regulating their emotions and navigating challenges as they arise through the day? Well, there are a few examples of how trauma-informed design can support. For example, many facilities have used multisensory rooms as a way to help de-escalate situations or emotions. And these spaces typically offer different calming and sensory elements that help people feel good and relax and regain a sense of control. So just for a moment, I invite you all to take a deep breath and notice how your body feels. What does the chair beneath you feel like? Is maybe your neck a little stiff from looking at the computer? Can you feel the floor beneath your feet? So being able to pay attention to your body can really be helpful when emotions are running high. And multisensory rooms can create spaces that encourage us to do just that, connect with our senses and be more present and slow down. For example, the image on the screen that you're seeing here shows a multisensory room that has LED lights and a projection that shows this yellow orb with calming visuals. It also has beanbags and a cushioned floor and calming music. And in this particular example, their beanbags can actually sync to the music of the room and vibrate to the beat, which also helps kids connect with the calming sounds around them. And where possible, we also invite you to think about ways in which you can bring these elements from these rooms into common spaces so that you're not just having them in a special room, but instead throughout your spaces so youth can access them at any time. And another spatial adaptation that can support a person's ability to regulate their emotions is having a more private and quiet seating nook in a common space. And this is a great thing for people who may need to take a step back from a very social or loud interaction, or who just kind of want a quiet moment. And then another example is having a break room for staff to decompress. We hear this quite often, that staff don't always have a place to go to take a mental or physical break. So think about ways in which you might be able to facilitate this so that your staff and your colleagues can take a moment of respite throughout their day. And last, also having more informal gathering areas to play games and hang out can also be really helpful, especially when it's a space similar to a living room, like the one that you're seeing here on the screen. And then another area of opportunity is related to outdoor spaces and connections to nature. Many of the young people that we talked to shared how important it was to them to touch grass, to look at the sky, to see the stars, and to feel connected to their natural environment. And this is actually something that is supported by research that shows that young people who spend time in green space report lower perceived stress, a better overall mood, and also a higher quality of life. So it's really important to look for opportunities to bring youth and staff out into nature, and also to bring nature into your facility. And some of the ways that you can do this, for example, is to add grass and trees and bushes to outdoor spaces. And this can also be really helpful to soften the look of fences and barbed wire that surround the perimeter of a facility. And this image that you're seeing here in the bottom right corner is from a secure facility for youth in Germany. And it shows how much of a difference it can make to have trees and grass. And then another opportunity is to create outdoor gathering areas that are next to natural elements like trees and shrubs, or maybe also even a water fountain. So the image that you're seeing here in the top right corner is a great example of how design can accommodate for different types of gathering. So you could imagine having groups of maybe 2 to 3 people hanging out in the space, having separate conversations, or maybe also people sitting in a circle around that central area, or perhaps even people sitting in rows and then watching a performance at the center. So having different spaces can really change the mood and the vibe of how we're able to engage with one another, and it can be really important and really transformational. And then another opportunity is to create spaces where youth can engage in a variety of exercises and activities and sports that are based on their interests. And some examples that we've seen include, for example, a basketball court or a sand volleyball court, a gym, and sometimes even trails with exercise stations. And some facilities have also created really amazing gardens and greenhouses for youth to grow edible plants and herbs. And then another way to increase connections to nature is to bring nature in by including plants in indoor spaces, especially plants that have air purifying qualities. So these examples that you're seeing here show pothos plants and snake plants and spider plants that are relatively low maintenance plants and can live in low light and also have air purifying qualities. I've had several pothos plants in rooms that have pretty low natural light, and they do great. It's a great plant to start with, and it adds a lot to indoor spaces. But like us, just remember that they do need a little light. This is a quote that we shared in our previous webinar, but I wanted to share it again because I think it really highlights how transformative connections to nature can be for youth. So this young person shared, "Our juvenile hall made plans to open a garden, and one of the youth lifers went out there and just sat down and grabbed a handful of grass and dirt, and he was just as happy as I've ever seen him. Access to nature is very healing." So much of the experience in facilities is framed by concrete and steel, which creates really harsh and cold and often loud environments. If you think of a facility right now, you can probably picture the echoing of loud noises and sometimes even the door slamming. And during our last webinar, we asked folks what spaces help them feel calm, and a large majority of people shared answers of places that involved the natural environment, like walking in the woods or walking in the beach. And all the images evoked very different sensorial images, like birds chirping and leaves crunching, or maybe even waves crashing on a beach. So our spaces are really important in shifting what we sense and what we taste and what we smell and feel. And something to think about is how we can help better connect our senses to nature through our spaces. Another opportunity is to adapt spaces to better support youth and staff by improving spaces for visitation and connection. We heard this from youth, and it's also something that is supported by research, that having strong and supportive connections with family and loved ones and community is one of the most strong predictors of success once youth go back into their community. And both youth and families often struggle with the existing visitation spaces because they don't always allow them to engage in more natural ways. So it's important to work with your youth and hopefully your CBOs and your families to find ways in which you can support a more home-like visitation experience. So what do we mean by this? This is about considering the full visitation experience and thinking about how someone arrives to the facility, how they get to the facility, how they cross the security threshold, what it's like to visit their loved one, and then also the experience of leaving the facility. And some things to think about include considering the many ways in which youth may want to engage with their visitors and how your furnishings and your supplies could help you support this. So one thing we heard is that a lot of dads and moms love connecting with their kids while giving them a haircut, for example, and also helping them with homework or sharing a meal, or even playing a board game or a video game together. So it's also important to make sure that spaces support positive connections, not just for those who are visiting, but also between youth and also with facility staff and program providers and CBOs. And this might mean having lounge or cafe-like environments for casual conversations, and also spaces that can facilitate conversations in a circle, for example, or meeting rooms or more private spaces that can also be really important for allowing for mentorship and the building of deeper relationships. And also spaces that allow for virtual meetings and more private conversations over the phone. Something that we've heard is that a lot of times in facilities, phones are placed close together because it makes it easier for a phone company to service the phones if one of them is broken. But perhaps something to consider is to allow for some separation between the phones, ideally acoustic separation, that can give youth more audio privacy when they're making calls. And this is something that could also serve to alleviate the burden on staff, who are often having to bring youth into their offices or interview rooms to support private phone calls. Access to education and training and job opportunities is linked to reduced recidivism and increased employment rates after release. And spaces can support learning and career building by encouraging and normalizing moments for studying and skill building. So I invite you all to think about where the spaces in and around your homes that help you learn and also that just facilitate an idea of learning. So picture a college library maybe, or cafes or study booths. And here the important thing is to think about how we might be able to recreate the feeling of the spaces in our environments. So consider creating spaces that support the development of specific skills that are aligned with your youth's interests and also your partner's capabilities. Some spaces that might include this, maybe a computer lab or a makerspace. We've also seen auto body shops or also a barber shop. And another way in which spaces can support education and skills building is by providing event spaces and outdoor areas that can support lectures, performances, and many other events. So here in the top left image, we have a photo of Dwayne Betts, who is the founder of the organization Freedom Reads. And as part of their Freedom Library program and their bookshelf distribution, he also goes into facilities to talk about his experience being incarcerated as a kid and how reading helped him pursue an education that ultimately led him to get a law degree from Yale Law School. And the last opportunity that we'll share for adapting and repurposing spaces is related to play and artistic expression. So youth in detention are still developing, and their skill building should not only be limited to job and career readiness, but also allow for self-expression, having fun, and playing around. And research shows that youth in detention who participate in artistic activities see improvements in their academic focus, their social emotional skills, and also face less disciplinary infractions. So look for opportunities in your spaces to create areas that are dedicated to play and artistic expression, such as music, a recording studio, an art studio, or a woodworking shop. And another way to tap into this opportunity is to allow youth to display and make art as part of the redesign of your spaces. So the image that you're seeing here in the bottom left is from a library where youth get to display their paintings as part of an art program. So we invite you to think about your most foundational experiences when you were growing up. So for example, was it jumping the rope or learning how to ride a bike? Maybe learning how to swim. I think for me, it was learning how to put together a tent. So thinking about this may help us to think about ideas in which we might be able to temporarily repurpose spaces to facilitate some of these activities in your facility. And they might really resonate with your youth. So there's opportunities to make kind of temporary adaptations that accommodate for really foundational experiences with a little creativity and imagination. And we wanted to share, this is a case study from Sacramento Juvenile Hall, where they opened a multisensory de-escalation room that allows youth to take a step back and relax and decompress. And this room has the option to play relaxing music. They also have aromatherapy, tactile toys, and chairs where youth can sit in comfortably and play games with each other and also with staff. And here a resident shared, I'm learning patience, I'm learning how to react differently to a situation. And according to Sacramento Probation, since its implementation, they've seen a 40% reduction in uses of root confinement and also the need to use force in the facility. And what I love about this image is that honestly, you can't tell if it's in a secure facility or not, which is a pretty incredible thing to achieve. And then another really great example of what repurposing a space can do is actually at Sonoma's Juvenile Hall, where they've opened the Free Voices Music Studio, which allows youth to play and to record music. And one of their residents shared, Free Voices gives us the freedom to think freely and be creative. Free Voices also brings residents together through music. And the music studio has not only been an opportunity for youth to be creative and develop their skills, but also to develop meaningful relationships with community mentors and also with volunteers. And this is the image that you're seeing here is from the recording space. And then in the next slide, there's an image of the music studio. And here another resident shared that the space is a place where I get to express myself and say what I'm thinking and what I want to do in the future. So here I'm gonna invite Kylie Wilson, who is the Probation Division Director at Sonoma County's Juvenile Hall. And she's going to share some insights around what went well in the design and implementation process, and also some challenges and how the response from youth and staff has been so far. So Kylie, if you're around, please feel free to unmute and.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for highlighting our program. We greatly appreciate it, and it has received quite a bit of attention, which is also fantastic. Whenever you do something of this nature, it's very, very helpful to have passionate staff, and that's exactly what we had, was musically inclined, passionate staff that really had a desire to create and maintain a program for our residents. It takes quite a bit because there's a lot of things that go into it. We started with the musical equipment between mixing boards and recording devices, speakers. We needed a MacBook because that's the best way to mix and master the music, acoustic paneling, and then various instruments. The instruments that we have on hand are guitars, both acoustic and electric, bass, trumpet, saxophone, flutes, clarinets, violin, harmonica, accordion, and a small piano. The focus is definitely production, recording, and then beginner and intermediate instruction, as well as music writing. So we have programs for songwriting, spoken word, poetry, learning about different genres. We also do a monthly beats challenge that has a new theme and a beat to it each month between the various housing units. And we recently just recorded a cipher video that the youth were had the opportunity to watch. And then right now we're working on a holiday album. We've been very grateful to have an excellent music producer in addition to music teachers. The music producer really makes the product professional and has just an excellent quality to it. And then our music teachers are providing lessons and programming. Again, the passion of staff is extremely important, and then just to be able to get us connected to other professionals to sustain it. We've also had staff and youth create music together, which has been a pretty cool thing to see. Initial concerns, initially, definitely the use of having the lyrics and everything be appropriate. There's definitely guidelines to avoid topics like violence, gangs, drug, or anything explicit. Surprisingly, this hasn't been a problem at all. The creativity has actually been quite impressive. I'll say in any major project, the two big things are always time and money in terms of challenges. Money for us was not as much of an issue because we had grant funding, but having our staff really put this together, there were some delays just based on facility needs that didn't get our program started quite as quickly as we may had liked it to happen, but it still progressed well and opened up in a reasonable time frame. Youth really enjoy the music studio. As mentioned, the creativity has far exceeded any of our expectations. And then lastly, I would share that doing a press release through your county or agency is extremely helpful. It brought a lot of attention to our program, and so we were highlighted in various media outlets. That resulted in people reaching out to us to offer donations or musical connections that we otherwise might not have had access to. So that was very beneficial. And that's a very quick wrap on the program, how amazing it's going, and just some of the challenges that we initially had.
Thank you so much, Kylie. This is so exciting to see, especially what an effort from staff to put together, initiate it, and especially with so rewarding to see such a great response from the community and youth. So thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate you joining us. I'm going to pass it on to Nathaniel, who's going to keep us going here.
Thanks, Violetta. Wow, that music studio is awesome. And yeah, Kylie, thanks for sharing that. We're hearing that another music studio is shaping up in El Dorado County. So yeah, so good. Really cool example. I'd like to pivot to design recommendations, focusing on the importance of look and feel. Look and feel of spaces you all really have a lot of control over. It is, the low-hanging fruit. It can be done with smaller budgets. Here we're looking at options and opportunities for light and windows, materials and color, and also ways to improve acoustic performance. As a reminder, our toolkit also contains a card deck with a range of medium scale design ideas, as well as options for finished material choices and color palette options. This exercise in the toolkit has different cards that show color palettes, how different woods, wood stains, and other materials feel and look, and invites you, your youth, and your staff to brainstorm and connect to different elements that affect the overall atmosphere of a space. Often this is called making a mood board, and it's a great activity and can get to consensus on design solutions. In terms of light and windows, we had one member of the youth advisory board that had shared with us, and I quote, natural light affects your mental and physical health. Yeah, and scientists agree, daylight and time outside truly affect our mood. And our design recommendations for light and windows are to bring in outdoor areas with distinct zones as distinct spaces, help frame a variety of activities and provide areas for gathering, conversations, and to seek privacy. To incorporate covered structures so more spaces have good comfort and light levels through the changing seasons and weather conditions. To offer the option to open and close the windows if possible, or to allow adjustment of light to control glare and ventilation. Could be wonderful as we're hearing from youth, and considering other options to support physical comfort, like talking to youth about what would help them be more comfortable, see what's feasible while keeping everyone safe and secure. Another example is providing dimmable or adjustable light fixtures, providing the ability to modulate lighting for different tasks, different uses, different times of day. And yeah, switching to materials and colors, there's more cost-effective ways to update materials, change color, bring softness, and tie together interiors while maintaining secure spaces. The surfaces youth and staff see and touch every day are a great place to start. One youth advisor shared with us that, quote, everything's concrete, we can do better than that, unquote. And we truly can by doing things like moving away from hard interior surfaces like unfinished concrete, using chalkboard paint in rooms to help, allow youth to draw, express themselves, introduce soft materials such as carpets, area rugs, and upholstered furniture that can also help define spaces and bring art into interior and exterior spaces. So introducing coordinated paint and materials based on a natural color palette can bring calm and cohesiveness to an interior, and also bring together an atmosphere that perhaps youth have selected to create together with your teams. In terms of acoustics, many of the materials like concrete that allow spaces to be strong and secure tend to have poor acoustic qualities that lead to loud and tinny sounding spaces and actually adversely affect safety because the lack of communication, the ability to understand one another, the amplification of noise, and sort of general chaos in tinny, bad acoustic spaces. In order to update spaces to be quieter and improve clarity of communication and safety, we've heard from youth and staff that some existing spaces, had made it hard to hear themselves think. So how to improve those acoustic areas, areas with problematic acoustics, incorporating sound attenuating finishes like acoustic panels and sound baffles, adding rugs and soft surfaces, soft furniture, particularly in common areas or louder areas like recreation rooms, and adding things like door sweeps and sound insulation to reduce noise transmission between spaces, particularly in sleeping areas, study spaces, or staff offices. So some examples, as part of our site visits related to this work, the staff of the Santa Cruz County Juvenile Hall were really kind to connect with us, give us a tour of their facility, really spend a lot of time with us, And among the softened spaces that the Santa Cruz team had adapted included this library space where youth can gather, engage in their interests, including reading, playing games, and hanging out in a space that features really ample daylight, a natural color palette, movable, comfortable seating, and a lot of art, including youth murals and other art and graphics that are curated or created with the youth there in Santa Cruz. Here's another amazing example from Santa Cruz, an open courtyard space with a sand volleyball court, raised garden beds, and another huge mural. When we visited, a group called Unchained had brought a bunch of dogs in and were running an interactive program with youth. It was really great to see. And it's been helpful to have visited facilities like Santa Cruz as a team, and we're thankful for the time and the care the Santa Cruz team brought to our site visit. Today, I believe we have Jennifer Martinez, Assistant Division Director, Santa Cruz County Probation, with us on the webinar. We'd reached out about sharing some more about the good work that's happening at Santa Cruz. Jennifer, thanks again for hosting our team. And if you are indeed online and able to highlight some changes, we'd love to hear your firsthand account.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thanks for having us and thanks for highlighting Santa Cruz County. Yeah, I'll share a couple of things about our journey. Certainly the murals that you're seeing now have been a progression over time. We started with one mural and had a lot of success with engaging the youth in the design process and even the painting. They worked alongside the muralists to create the design, but then also to paint the murals. So a lot of fun, building skills along the way, certainly learning how to be part of a project beyond the painting skills themselves. So we now have murals in our courtyard, which is highlighted here, our dining room that we also use for our family visiting space, what we call a soft room or soft counseling room, also kind of an individualized visiting space in our front area of our facility, and both of our classrooms. Our classrooms were the most recent murals where we collaborated with County Office of Education to, again, bring in another amazing muralist who worked with the youth. They were able to earn school credits during that time. It was incorporated as far as like the design, and there were different themes that they chose for the two classrooms. So the teachers did a real great job of incorporating that into their lessons as well. So that was a lot of fun. I think you also highlighted our library space. That was a recent collaboration with Santa Cruz Public Libraries and the County Office of Education. So this was a space that really was underutilized, I would say. It's served different purposes over the years. But really, we saw an opportunity to bring in and create a library. It's kind of a multi-use space, really, for programming, but houses our library as well. And again, the partnerships were just so important. The creativity, we pulled together resources to support this project. The youth were involved and staff were involved in the process as well, from learning how to categorize library materials to selecting the artwork to planting the plants and taking care of the ongoing plants, to really just think about what they would want to soften the space or have different seating areas. And it has been really popular. So it's definitely welcomed by youth and staff, as well as creates just another opportunity and more access for some of our youth to have just an additional program space. So we have various programs that happen in that space as well. And then along with this project isn't pictured here, but same time we were creating the library, we were working really closely with and using some of the same funding as well, working along closely with our children's behavioral health to create or to transform two of our individual youth rooms back in our units. We're a small facility, 2 units. So one on each unit we transformed into soft counseling rooms. So we removed the bed slab, the toilet and sink area. We replaced or put in nice flooring for softer feel. We covered up the walls and ceiling. So it wasn't kind of the cinder block brick walls with, drywall, a little bit of texture. We took out the institutional lights. One of the things that the kids really wanted was to be able to kind of dim the light for their sessions with their therapist. Every kid kind of likes it in a different way, and so created, the opportunity to give them that. We've put in couches, chairs, and the ability to just bring in soft materials, weighted blankets, kind of one of those things called squishmallows, and just various fidgets and materials that the counselors can bring in. Creates a space for the youth to be able to meet with a therapist back on the units, and just an alternate space in general. So now we have multiple spaces where youth can utilize therapy. Also creates an additional space for our staff to meet with youth, maybe during initial orientation, just a softer, quiet space that has been really utilized quite a bit since we've created it. I would say just along the way, what worked well for us was engaging youth and staff. I know that we've continued to hear that. And also, I think it does, including the youth particularly in this process, like creates a sense of ownership. They take care of the spaces that they've helped create. They really like being able to pick out the artwork or the colors, or down to they pick the rugs and the pillows for those spaces. Really had quite an opinion about what those would look like and what would feel good to them. So that was really fun to engage them in the process. I think it also inspired creativity and allowed them to develop skills, to advocate for their wants and needs, as well as project development, and then some of those other skills that we talked about as far as painting or design. And I think the challenges, it was highlighted before, certainly time and money. I think when you have some of these projects like murals, there's things that, or construction projects, there's things that come up and involving the youth in that process, as far as painting or design, or staff as well with various shifts or other parts of their day can make those projects take a little bit longer, but definitely it's beneficial in other ways. I think other challenges can be money. Of course, we wish we had more funding and could, create more spaces within our facility. So we're working through that. And overall, I would just say that it certainly improves their overall experience and well-being. We're excited as we continue to transition. We have a couple of big projects coming up, one particularly regarding some renovations and construction on our campus, which is just going to open up additional space, as well as allow us to redesign some of our current spaces. So we're pretty excited to kind of use the same process and design method to continue to improve other spaces within our facility. Thank you.
That was great. Thanks, Jennifer. It's good to see you again. And also amazing, vivid descriptions. It really transported me to make me feel like imagine it and see what all the things that were in there in these spaces that we weren't picturing in our slides. I really liked how you highlighted this idea of talking with youth around how to take care of a space. And also when you offer kind of this idea of how do you offer opportunities for customization of the experience that people want to have, like the one about the therapy example is a great one. Thanks again for your time and jumping into our webinar here. It was amazing to visit and see maybe some of these spaces firsthand. I will keep us going into our next section and turn our attention into considering furnishings and details. We know that they're the typical furnishings, we find in detention, like modular bolted furniture, detention grade mirrors, or hard slab beds. We know that they address important security features and also ligature concerns, but they can also reinforce the nature of confinement and create spaces that feel unwelcoming and sometimes dehumanizing. So what if we were to reimagine some of these elements while still achieving the need for safety? But how do we move away from prison-like atmospheres toward more comfortable, dignified, and healing spaces? And it's easy to think that we can, harden some of these finishes to help with durability, but we know that some of the research we found conducted by the Federal Bureau of Prisons actually showed that using, for example, porcelain toilets instead of steel actually resulted in less vandalism and less need for maintenance and consistent replacement. And the same went for what they found with upholstered furniture. So spaces and furniture that communicated dignity and respect were likewise treated with more dignity and respect, as opposed to furniture that residents have said, quote, challenge us to find ways to break it down. So in case you're wondering, yes, we also have some tools available in our design toolkit to help brainstorm some of these elements. And we have a few card decks that have a range of furnishings and small scale detailed ideas that can help brainstorm with youth and staff around the daily items and elements that they might use and set some priorities across a different variety of options for what you would include in a space. So let's start with furniture. This has come up a lot in our conversations today. We know from experience with partnering with facilities as well as our work in healthcare and hospitals that priority is always safety. However, we find that when we solely center anti-ligature or furniture that you can't necessarily move easily, it can intentionally result in harsher environments or can exacerbate behaviors and stress responses. So wherever it is appropriate and possible, work with youth and staff, partners to determine what types of furniture could better support the desired uses you would like to see in that atmosphere. And some examples could be about providing varied seating in common areas that allows for flexibility to accommodate group activities or individual relaxation, just like you see in the image in the top left. And then when you think about outdoor spaces, engage with youth to identify, what types of activities they enjoy and choose furniture that supports those interests. So if you look at the image in the bottom left, installing durable raised garden beds can support a horticulture program, which would allow youth and staff as well to get, their hands dirty and working together in fulfilling and satisfying ways. The same goes for installing, for example, picnic tables to support group meals or even kind of share a meal with visitors. Similarly, in dining areas, providing dining tables and chairs that more closely resemble those found in a home, it can create a more familiar, comfortable environment during meals. In visitation spaces, selecting age-appropriate furniture for children and younger siblings, such as small chairs and tables, this can ensure that they feel included and comfortable during their visit. And as we think about furniture more broadly, when possible, I invite you all to consider opportunities to build or assemble furniture together with youth. And just as with furniture, equipment can be a way to enhance the functionality of a space, but it can also support the programs and activities that might relate to skill building. And we've heard across facilities that there are amazing programs out there that require different types of specialty equipment in their facilities, and we've gathered some to get some inspiration from them. So you might consider setting up a small kitchen or kitchenette where youth and staff can prepare meals together. There can be a small one-on-one meal prep education, or simply heat up a snack when desired. Or you can take this further, right, as we saw before, where you can provide a space for growing food, such as a garden or a hydroponic system that supports both culinary and horticultural learning. And then when you think about supporting diverse learning opportunities, providing up-to-date technology tailored to the needs and interests of youth is something to consider. We know technology changes very quickly these days, but thinking about how you include computers and tablets with internet access for educational purposes can go a long way. Or the specialized equipment, like we saw in a previous example, right? How do you add, music production tools for youth interested in this medium, all the way to gym equipment, like yoga mats or sports gear for basketball or soccer or any other activity that support youth and staff interests. Lastly, we know details are all encompassing. They can be everything from thoughtfully chosen decorations or essential supplies to create more comfortable environments that evoke a sense of home and help youth feel more engaged. So we invite you to work closely with youth to identify what home means to them and how key elements and objects or items can help bring that sensation into their space. Some of the examples that we thought about include adding culturally or personally relevant items like art, photos, or textiles that reflect people's identities or make the environment feel more familiar and supportive. This could also include books or blankets. Other details in this vein might include art supplies or musical instruments or creative tools to give youth different outlets and opportunities to express themselves and engage in meaningful activities. And just to reiterate that in visitation areas, as we've heard, providing things like toys, books, decor for children and younger siblings to make them feel welcome. We're also highlighting mirrors. We know that access to mirrors is provided in the regulations, and it's also in OICR's Youth Dignity Guide, but it's well worth mentioning here as well to ensure that mirrors are available in all sleeping rooms and other spaces, allowing youth to see themselves and maintain a connection with their self-image. And finally, being adaptable with your resources. What do we mean by this? So even with limited supplies or space, look for creative ways to offer skills building opportunities that align with youth needs and interests. For example, if somebody wants or needs to pass a driving test, you may not have an access for a full driving course, of course, but what if you use paint or cones on a hard surface to create a temporary driving practice area, or using another form of VR technology to set up test driving modules. Or if there's a need to better learn about financial literacy, setting up computers and inviting external partners can help facilitate these workshops. The bottom line is, how can we be flexible and responsive with our spaces to ensure youth have access to valuable learning experiences, even if in less traditional formats? And we're happy to share another example from one of our site visits from earlier this year. Chief Reyes and his team at San Luis Obispo shared their programs and facility spaces at their Coastal Valley Academy and their SYTF. Their recently opened SYTF features, an open kitchen adjacent to the day room space, and we just thought this space was fantastic. It allows youth to practice independent living skills and provides agency to decide when youth need a snack or what they would like to eat. We've heard over and over again the significance of being able to learn to cook meals and share them with staff and peers from youth, or even with family visitors from time to time. So here, what you can see in the image, there's appliances and finishes for the kitchen space that are very similar to what you would see in a home. And up in the wall, if you look at the art that's displayed there with the nature scene of the ocean, we know that research supports that having nature scenes in art can serve as a positive distraction and contribute to a calming environment. And here's another example from SLO at their Coastal Valley Academy. Right off of the day room in this unit, youth have access to a garden and a recreation area with turf. The garden has planting beds, seating, huge trees, shade, and even a barbecue for special events. And we know spaces like this are rare, right? And they're not typical in most facilities, but we found this is a wonderful example that holds a different number of elements that provide youth with critical opportunities to decompress and also to have fun. And before we move on, we have also another Jennifer. I want to invite Jennifer Gonzalez, Assistant Chief Deputy Probation Officer at San Luis Obispo, to share a little bit more about the work you're doing. Jen, if you're on the line, thanks again for joining us. Can you share a little bit about this?
Hello, good afternoon, Alejandro. Thank you very much for inviting us. So again, Jennifer Gonzalez, Assistant Chief Deputy at the Juvenile Hall here in San Luis Obispo. So a couple of the photos that you showed were our CVA garden, also our kitchenette on our unit. So with our CVA garden, some of the things that was a heavier lift, and it would require some private contractors coming in. What we did is we utilized a unoccupied location on the side of our facility that we recognized that had a large tree. We realized that it was a space that we hadn't used in the past. So we took advantage of that. We put some planter boxes, some benches, picnic tables. And we also got some feedback from some of the youth on the locations of those things. So some of the challenges with that obviously was a larger lift. So we had the private contractors assist us with that. We had to consider like water flow and, the consideration of any flooding, because it was a restructuring of some area. Some of the things that our youth took part in is I don't know if you could see in some of the photos, but we have some rocks there, and the youth personalized some of the rocks and some of the locations of those. So the other photos I think that you showed were the kitchenette. So our kitchenettes on our unit, we also had an outside contractor assist us with that. That was adding a refrigerator, an oven, a stove, and then the cabinets. So our youth really enjoy that because it's on the unit and it's on the living unit. So it provides the youth with life skills. It's a functional space that they can also learn a lot about household chores. They wash dishes in that area, dry them, put them away, prepare food. We also partner with our Office of Education, and we work with career technical education on the unit. And so the youth are able to cook and do some culinary arts during the work week or during the week with their classroom. So, and the youth enjoy that as well. And then I think you also mentioned some of the furniture we have. So we recently purchased some furniture in our living units and then also in our rooms, just to provide a more home-like environment. Recently, we also did some painting in our rooms, which offered a whole nother look. And then we have some chalkboards painting that we also put into the rooms, and the youth enjoy that as well.
Thanks so much for sharing your experience, Jennifer. It's really great to hear about how you're taking advantage of underutilized spaces. And we've also seen the chalkboard paint used, giving residents the opportunity to express themselves in more creative and flexible ways has been something that we've seen put to really positive effect.
Thank you.
So hopefully we've been talking for a long time. Maybe a note to myself, 2 hours for a webinar is a long webinar. But so hopefully this doesn't feel like too much. But I just wanted to kind of give another reminder, as we mentioned a couple of times. Each of these ideas, spaces and activities, look and feel, and furnishings and details are included in a toolkit. To really think about how you might be able to facilitate a workshop with your youth and staff to identify some of these low-hanging fruit opportunities, as well as to set priorities for your facility. So if you're interested in getting a hard or digital copy, Violetta, maybe we could drop in the link again. But really our hope is for this toolkit to help you facilitate conversations. So fill out that form, we can mail you a toolkit, and this is still being finalized, but potentially we could hold one-on-one sessions or group webinar training after you receive it to help go into more detail about how you can use it to facilitate conversations. In addition to the workshops, that we've talked about, we also have an introductory narrative that takes the form of a comic book that helps to tell the history of the role of architecture and how it's been used in incarceration, and how and why our built space around us affects our day-to-day work, play, and living within detention facilities. So that's hopefully going to be a cool part of the toolkit. So just to wrap up, as a reminder, your design process doesn't just start and stop with the idea and implementation of a design vision. As you prepare for renovations, one important thing to keep in mind is something that we call change management. So whenever you undertake a capital project or renovation, you're going to have to think through how all of your actions and behaviors might shift as a result of these changes. You might need to implement a totally new program. Or, for example, you might want to come up with rules or often what we call norms about how to use a new piece of exercise equipment or shared couches. so that really everyone's on the same page about how you share belongings, time, and respect each other's need for quiet or respite, or like what's the watering schedule for some of those plants that we've seen, and how who's going to be taking care of them and weeding. In addition to potentially needing to create norms, there's also the very real possibility that an intervention doesn't work the way that you wanted it to right away. And so that does not mean you should give up. I think the natural human tendency is to, if something doesn't work, to go back to the way that you were doing it before. And we really strongly, really sincerely, and earnestly just would encourage and urge you to fight that urge, to try to work on work with your youth and your staff to identify what went wrong and get to the root of why, and really and have those conversations to brainstorm new paths forward instead of going back. Included in the PDF that we'll send out after today's webinar, we've also included an appendix of case studies. So these represent the collection of facilities that we have visited and researched and talked with you all about in order to understand what's possible in your spaces and where other facilities have kind of gone ahead and forged these new ideas or opportunities. This case study appendix will consolidate many more examples of spaces from both secure and non-secure settings to really highlight, and what we have done in the case studies is highlighted the different design elements to pay attention to in each case and how they are helping the different facilities achieve the goals. This is an example of a case study page that includes a bit more about the locations and the design elements. So everything we've recommended today comes from the things that we've heard and seen directly in secure facilities. And in addition to these ideas, we've also received some feedback that there's no shortage of ideas about how to improve the experience of facilities. But we ourselves have not had the opportunity to implement or test those changes. But we wanted to include them in the special section called Emerging Ideas. So two of these ideas are about the experience of arrival. So we've heard so much about how harsh and traumatizing the experience of arriving at a detention facility can be, and just wanted to suggest that there's opportunities to reconsider the physical experience of arriving at a facility, the transition process of staying in holding and intake spaces before then transitioning to a longer term placement. And we know that same experience is mirrored in family visitation. So even if you've been really thoughtful about the room itself, where family members might interact with the youth, often the process of arriving or going through security or walking through hallways can be one that's impersonal or cold. And that can really color the full experience of visitation and potentially discourage children or relatives from visiting. We've also heard some excitement about the potential to invest in spaces that support extended family visits. So like an overnight stay or a weekend visit to really expand upon the opportunity for youth to spend time engaging in a multiplicity of ways with their family. Another idea that's emerged from our engagement with the youth advisory board that has really stuck with us is one youth member reflected that they couldn't remember the last time they were able to look up at the night sky and see stars or the moon. So if spatial configurations allow for more freedom for youth to access the outdoors outside of a rigid schedule, they might be able to, really connect with that kind of like core human desire. And finally, our expanded design process also includes the process of making. It was really great to hear, Jennifer, about kind of you sharing your own experience of youth caring more about the spaces that they've helped to create. And so we just wanted to echo that idea. We've seen a lot of facilities that have used like a woodworking shop to help facilitate residents in making their own furniture, or hiring their residents to paint walls or create art to decorate rooms. And so where possible, we just would encourage you to look for opportunities for youth and staff to be involved in the making of their own spaces. I think this really helps exercise this core desire that we all have for autonomy and creative expression. And we have likewise found across all of our projects and project typologies that engaging stakeholders in the process of construction, in the process of making, can really help create that deeper sense of ownership and care over spaces. So Alejandra, do you want to lead us through? We are like right on the cusp of breakout groups. Do we want to have breakout groups still? I know we've run a little long.
I think it's worthwhile. Maybe just
All right, let's go for it.
15 minutes. We can talk about it here in a short minute, but I needed to stretch. I don't know if anybody else needs to move really quick to just kind of, we know it's been a while here, but we're excited to get to this portion of the webinar to hear more from everybody. And wanted to just put in a really quick plug here and remind folks that we will have, the Mass Design team will have dedicated hours for design, training, and technical assistance next year. But we'll be working with what that process will look like together with OICR and Chiefs in January. So stay tuned for that. But just excited to kind of foreshadow that in the next year. So we're excited to keep working with y'all and continue to learn from y'all. So we thought we were going to split up into a few breakout groups for a few minutes. It's not going to be a whole while, but it just want to make sure people come up mute and share a little bit more about what's on their mind. We're going to have, I think, 4 breakout groups, and we'll have a Mass team member, one of us, available in each of your groups to help facilitate. But we really want the space to be for you all to share and learn from each other. We like to call this activity Rose, Thorn, Bud. So we invite you to reflect on if you can do it for everything that we've shared so far, or just pick something and kind of consider what's something that you can do tomorrow. What's a challenge that you might face, or what's a longer term goal that you might set for yourselves and your facility. So I'm going to look to our amazing team with Tara and Jackie. But if we're ready to get into our groups, feel free to ask any questions to the Mass team member that's with you. We'll come back in around 15 minutes and just do a quick share out, but also open it up for bigger questions to the group. Anything else I missed, team? Are we ready to go in? Welcome back, everybody. That just flew by super quick. I'm sure not everybody got to their questions, and that's okay. Y'all can see a bright blue screen, yeah? Okay, see some head nods. Awesome. I thank you everybody for just diving right in and being super engaged in the prompt so thoughtfully. We now have a little bit of time, not too much time, for share out and Q&A. But I'm gonna look to our team. Do we want to do like a quick share out and a Q&A, or do we want to just open it up for questions? Don't want us to like be rushing. No, we want to wrap up on time for folks to go back to their days.
I think both. Maybe if anyone feels really excited about sharing out or had a burning question, about something you heard or one of the case studies, kind of want to just make this time as productive as possible for everyone.
We had a great breakout group conversation led by Janelle Grace, who's a senior counselor and has had a lot to share across the Rosebud Thorn. Janelle, can I put you on the spot and ask you to share some of that wonderful, like, firsthand account of things you're trying and doing?
Just as far as the Rosebud Thorn, I said one of the things I could commit to as far as tomorrow, something I could do tomorrow, was the plants, the putting the plants around, which is something we've already played with and that I've suggested with my team. That's something on a very small scale that I'm able to do starting tomorrow. One of the thorns or difficulties or challenges is just navigating in a building that's already here and 21 years old. But we make do with what we have and what's provided to us. And earlier there was a discussion about staff wellness rooms, which is what we don't have here. And we do have a youth wellness room that's kind of wellness, not really. There definitely could be a lot of major improvements in there. But one of the things that I was sharing was if staff aren't able to have a wellness room or a place to decompress and get their thoughts together, how can they truly reinforce that for the youth if they're not in that mindset themselves. So I think it would be important for our county to assure that we have somewhere for the staff to focus on their wellness so that they can truly support the youth in theirs.
That's great, Janelle. Thank you. And anyone, feel free to hop in or even raise your hand if you want. Something that you said, somebody in our group, I won't say the name, said, yeah, the only living thing in our facility are the people. And so also was reflecting on kind of like the role of plants and that as like a really low hanging fruit opportunity.
We'll also highlight a little bit of what I heard in my group. I think there's still kind of an acknowledgement that there are a lot of, great opportunities for these spaces to be transformed. And in getting the information out, that's a huge opportunity then to kind of share back with more staff, more of the broader team to like understand what could be possible here, but also know that that in itself is going to be a big process to make sure people are brought along in the journey and that enough time is dedicated and effort to like creating that buy-in for staff, along with other maybe financial and capacity issues or concerns, so to speak, not necessarily issues. But I wanted to also offer if anybody who was in my group wanted to speak more to this kind of concern, or if there's any other things that came to mind around the implementation of providing new spaces around concerns for security or other things that y'all surfaced.
Maybe I can build on what Janelle Grace was sharing also, that going from sort of bud to rose in the terms we're using, starting by bringing plants in, and then it sounds like, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, Janelle, but getting a horticulture program started and finding some space alongside a sports field that has shade structure and the ability to really be a multi-purpose outdoor room for, cooling down after sport, or also, in this case, getting involved with plants in more of a learning context with some expertise coming in from community partners, and really sounded like an amazing program and space, new space you're creating with something you already have. And it sounds like a more long-term blossoming of the proverbial rose. So thanks for sharing that story, and let me know if I got it right.
Absolutely. That is correct.
I can share a little bit of what we talked about in our room, but anybody that was in it, please feel free to chime in. There were some really great visions for the future, a lot of related to visitation and incorporating the process of entering, not just the spaces of visit, and also paying attention to family engagement. And we also talked about just making sure that we are talking to youth as we make these changes, because a lot of times they're the ones that have a lot of wisdom of what has worked in the past and what is working currently, what is not working. So just making sure that we are just incorporating their feedback and making sure that we follow up. And also, similar to what Janelle was sharing, we talked about just also making spaces for staff to decompress and how important it is so that they can really show up in their day-to-day and help youth. And also, we talked about how sometimes a lot of youth, when they talk about their experience, they'll mention how pivotal it was to have a staff member that really cared. So just making sure that our spaces are supporting staff and showing up in their day-to-day. So if anyone would like to add to that, please chime in.
I also sorry to cut that short, just keeping an eye on time, really want to respect everybody that's been able to hang out with us for so long. And so we are here and available for more questions or comments, and we'll be sharing out some more information about what the training and technical assistance in the new year can look like. And maybe I'll just pass it to Lauren to close us out.
Yes, thank you, Regina. So I just want to have everyone join me in thanking the group from Mass Design today for sharing their inspiring ideas to shape our work. Thanks to all of you for coming and engaging in the webinar. And if you would take a minute and complete that survey that's in the chat, we would greatly appreciate it. So thank you all very much.